The Eastern Flank Deterrence Line is a use case for the Army's transformation concept. Innovation driving the next generation of credible ground deterrence. The Eastern Flank Deterrence Line allows NATO and U.S. forces to offset adversary advantage in mass and momentum by leveraging unmanned and low-cost systems brought to scale. By integrating these new forms of mass with well-trained, lethal, mobile, and survivable ground forces, backed with next-generation command and control, using live data to outsense, outthink, and outdecide the adversary. We operate in a drone and sensor-saturated environment. Ground forces must not only defend, but attack and seize objectives. Project Flytrap is leading joint experimentation and layering counter-UAS technology on the move. Allies adopting this approach across NATO's eastern flank are investing in acoustic and layered sensor networks, robotics and unmanned systems, testing and experimenting alongside U.S. forces, and lowering the cost curve by increasing demand signals for production. New technologies, meeting Allied investment, driving testing and experimentation, cohering NATO's integrated defense plans, driving the future of combat across all domains, transformation in the Army's premier theater, U.S. Army Europe and Africa, our nation's sword of freedom.
Okay, so any questions? No, I'm joking. I'm Charlie Costanza. I'm the 5th Corps Commander. I'm joined by the 2nd Cavalry Regiment Commander Don Neal. We're missing some folks, as you can see by the empty chairs, so I apologize for that. But what we're going to do probably in the next 20-30 minutes is just talk to you. I'll set the stage, talk to you a little bit about what Eastern Flank Deterrence Line is, because there's some confusion on what that might be. And then from there, I'll turn it over to Don. He'll talk more at the tactical level, talk about some of the innovation that 2nd Cavalry Regiment is doing to help operationalize at the tactical level the Eastern Flank Deterrence Line. And then we'll turn it over to you all for questions. And I expect there won't be very many because it's not lost on me, it's 1600. And I just came from the hotel and the bar's filling up and everybody was walking that way. So for all of you that are here, I appreciate you sitting and listening to us late in the afternoon. So the Eastern Flank Deterrence Line. So bottom line, what it is it's not a new plan for NATO. A lot of the NATO partners and allies think it's a replacement for NATO family of plans. Not the case. Regional command plans are the regional plans. Eastern Flank Deterrence Line is a way to take the best from the different militaries, not just U.S., but our NATO partners as well. It continues transformation and lessons from the U.S. Army's transformation and contact to integrate future capabilities that are already available now, or in production, or in development. So we take these capabilities based on what we're watching from the conflict in Ukraine, think long-range fires capabilities. So PRISM, already a capability we have right now. How does that change the way 5th Corps maybe fights differently? Specifically, when you talk battlefield framework, battlefield geometry, authorities, how we get after deep targets. Spike missile, Spike Milos. 12th Combat Aviation Brigade out of Germany just did a test fire out in the Baltic Ocean on the northwestern flank of Poland to demonstrate that capability. 50-kilometer range, non-line of sight. That changes the way 5th Corps has to think about fighting deep. One-way attack drones, we got that. Loitering munitions demonstrated through transformation and contact. Air and ground launched effects. So I think there's a lot of capabilities in the long-range fires arena that help us to realize an Eastern Flank Deterrence Line. Long-range, multiple domain sensing capability. Got all kinds of new capabilities out there available now We just got to figure out how to integrate them all together. Unmanned ground and air systems, proven in the conflict in Ukraine, both ground and air systems. Counter UAS, Don will talk a little bit more about some of the efforts we got going on in Europe right now with Project Flytrap as we try to take sensing capability and effector capability that's available now and integrate it into formations at the tactical level for counter UAS. All of these things that I just talked about, none of those are new. They exist now. What we need to do now is take those systems, integrate them with an AI-capable, data-driven mission command system. Sync it all together. Not just U.S., but across all our NATO partners in order to get after what we're trying to do. And really, so what is EFDL trying to do? It's trying to counter our enemy's mass and momentum capability. We know that's a challenge. When you look at the correlation of forces, not great. So how do we change that ratio in NATO's favor? So how do we get after counter mass and momentum? Number two, how do we assist the joint force? So from a NATO perspective, AirCom, to actually counter the enemy's A2AD capability and do it quickly. General Donahue wants to drive it to 72 hours. We eliminate those A2AD bubbles, which enables the joint force to support that ground force and not spend weeks trying to take down the enemy's IADs. And then lastly for 5th Corps is, if you're familiar with the regional plans for NATO, we are the Operational Reserve Regional Plan Center. And that means we're the counterattack force. So how do we use these capabilities, unmanned ground and air capabilities, to enable maneuver warfare and not get stuck in the attrition warfare that we see going on, very static, between Russia and Ukraine. So that's a little bit about EFDL, and I'll answer questions when I get done. But it's not just about new equipment and material. It's about new organizations. So 5th Corps is standing up. We've got an exercise we're doing next week, Avenger Triad for NATO allies out there. You're familiar with it. So this will be a multi-corps exercise under a Think Theater Army C2 structure. It's multi-corps command, land component command, which is USAR-URAF, a little bit of a plug-in in LANCOM. We're going to take the 138, it's a field artillery brigade out of the National Guard, and we're going to turn it into an operational fires command. We've been training with that staff in order for us to help synchronize both lethal and non-lethal capabilities, which frees up my 41st Field Artillery Brigade to focusing on being a Field Artillery Brigade and not trying to do that additional duty. So two other examples of organizational change. 2nd Cavalry Regiment is standing up what they call a Delta Company. I'll let Don talk a little bit about this, but it's taking all the different systems that can have effects, lethal, non-lethal, so not just kinetic, but EW, counter UAS, putting in one organization to synchronize those capabilities faster than what we're able to do right now. So that's another example. And then the last, you've seen this through other reporting for the U.S. rotational brigades that come through Europe. We've got new capabilities, new organizations, strike companies is what we're calling them, similar to what I just talked about with the Delta Company that Don Neal's standing up. So organizational change. But how about doctrinal change? How about thinking about how we're going to fight different? I talked about battlefield framework and geometry needs to be different. You know, the Corps can now actually sense and shape in what was previously the CJ Flick or Theater Army's T-Bearing. So how do we think about changing what we're doing with battlefield geometry. That requires us to relook authorities and change the way we think about and look at authorities at echelon. So I talked about unmanned capabilities, both ground and air, and part of the EFTL, as you all are well aware, NATO's not going to give up 1 inch of ground. The party's already started over there if anybody wants to go join it. NATO's not going to give up 1 inch of ground from the border, can't afford to. Think about our Baltic countries, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. They can't afford to give up 1 inch of territory. So how do we use these unmanned ground and aerial systems to really have an autonomous zone along the border between Belarus and Russia to get after that counter-massive momentum problem that I talked about? So some specific examples, all that sounded really great. But what are some specific examples that we're doing right now? Well, we already talked about some of this, and Don will talk more, but 2CR, they're 3D printing small UAS right now. And I'll let him talk about the capability they're doing at the brigade level. Nobody told him to do it. Him and his brigade just figured that out. Project Flytrap, getting after counter UAS based on sensing capability and effector capability that already exists. We've already done 4 iterations. The challenge has been getting the network straight, being able to have the data in a cloud-based environment that we can process it in a way that's integrated, not just with the counter UAS systems, but the larger integrated air and missile defense network, how we do that. So we're working through that. We've done 4 iterations to date. That's gotten us to the battalion level, both dismounted and mounted. We'll do Flytrap 4.5 the beginning part of next month. This will be at echelon from headquarters, CPX, command post exercise, division, brigade, battalion, to figure out how we can get after counter UAS, not just at the tactical level, but at the operational level. 12 Cab, I talked about Spike Missile. They're also working with a manned and unmanned teaming capability that's going on right now. 41st Fires. So my Fires Brigade has worked with Maven Smart System to figure out how to shorten the kill chain using AI capability that's very much data driven. That's one way that we're using Maven. 41st Fires is also using Maven to shorten the amount of time the staff puts into military decision-making process, AI enabled. So that is another example currently going on right now in Europe. So that's kind of a big broad overview of EFTL. And I'll turn it over to Don Neal to talk about a little bit of the tactical things that he's doing and innovating with inside his formation. And then we'll turn it over to you all to ask questions. So thanks very much.
All right, I think I'm on now. Thanks a lot, sir, for the intro and the opportunity. Again, I'm Colonel Donald Neal. I'm the commander of 2nd Cavalry Regiment. I am in charge of a 4,500-person organization forward assigned in Europe. And the thing I'll tell you as an overview is our mission is to drive to the fight within, anywhere within the European theater within 96 hours, make contact with an enemy. Because that's our mission set, and because of our proximity to the current conflict that's going on, we've gleaned a lot of lessons learned from Ukraine. Specifically when it comes to EW, the effects of EW, UAS, and counter UAS, that's where we spent a lot of our innovation efforts, and it's derived by the observations that we've had from studying what's going on to our east. When it comes to counter UAS, Project Flytrap, I'll just spend a brief minute here talking about what we've learned there. So the purpose really is to take, as General Cassini said, all the existing systems. Nothing was created for Project Flytrap to take place. It pulled a bunch of systems that already existed together, except for mounted on vehicles in an offensive manner. So a way to frame it maybe is to think about, in order to operate and go on the offensive, it requires protection from the small UAS that are flying in the sky. That's what Flytrap was really designed to do. What we learned is that there's really no one system solution. It takes a layered approach, and the way to think about it is you have to detect what's in the air, what's a threat, you have to decide what you're going to do about it, and then you need the means to actually do something about it. And so that layered approach is about passive and active. The reason why it matters is when it comes to passive sensing, you're less vulnerable to enemy attack if you have systems that can detect what's in the air passive-wise. It's got to be synchronized if you go with an active detection mode, but you need both because the passive allows you to see what's there with a low vulnerability of counterattack or destruction. Active gives you that finer, point of where the enemy threat is. And then when you talk about detection, the C2, next generation C2 AI-enabled decision making is what allows you to actually go into the two forms of doing something about the threat that's in the air, and that's through a kinetic means or that's through a non-kinetic means. So when we say it, we learn that it takes a layered approach. It takes all of those. There's no one system solution to protect in the air above you when you talk about offensive operations. And nothing that we use in Flytrap or new systems are things that existed and that we just tested in a different way.
Hey Don, real quick, what was neat about Flytrap, if you watch these different events, you got the soldiers and the vendors out in the field together working on how to solve these problems, integrate these capabilities on a mounted vehicle that they weren't designed to be mounted on, so you can have mobile counter UAS capability. And so I thought that was a great vignette, example of how we can partner with industry partners better, get them out in the field with the soldiers, and improve those different capabilities so we can get after a solution. And as Don said, it's definitely a layered approach. Passive is important because you don't give out that EW signature you can't pick up. You turn on the active sensors just when you need them, just very briefly, so the EW signature is short. Another lesson that we're learning from Ukraine. So thanks, Don, for what you guys do on Flytrap.
I think another note that's worth mentioning is this was multiple organizations and agencies that were a part of it, to include our UK partners. And their approach to it I thought was actually interesting and something that we'll incorporate in the future iterations of Flytrap. But we tried to do kind of the American way of war. We integrated systems down to like the user individual level. Their approach was to create small teams that actually took on the task of operating the systems, independent of the squad, of the small unit members that were on the ground. I think what I learned, our overall observation as a brigade was they might have a better approach because the cognitive load on decision makers at the small unit level is pretty great. So having a team that's embedded with the squads, platoons, and troop that takes care of that function is probably a better way to go, just based off of our observations. Change of topics. I'll talk about our purpose-built attritable system. So we just got done with the Saber Junction rotation. It's our training center rotation that's in Germany that allows us to basically fight a live OP4 opposing force in a simulated environment where you're under constant contact with an enemy for 24/7, and we did that for about 2 weeks straight. The goal before we went to our Saber Junction rotation was to build about 200 PBAS. We were able to do that, and I think what we learned from that is the capability that you really need to do is fairly simple. So I'll start with the people. When it comes to the expertise, I don't have anybody that has an MOS to build small drones. You're talking about soldiers that have a tenacity to learn. They get on YouTube, they see what's going on in Ukraine, and basically they have a proclivity to build these systems and an interest, a passion for it actually. We enable them to do that by buying, basically all the components, 3D printers. We've got, several across the regiment, and we were able to, from January until the end of May, build about 200 systems. The reason why we built them was very simple. It gets at the making contact with the robot or machine first. And we were able to test that in our rotation. The things that we learned is you're absolutely, for the units that were able to integrate the capability to combine arms, they were more lethal than the formations, than my formations that didn't integrate it. So it absolutely gave them the ability to make contact with the enemy and come up with a firing solution to destroy the enemy that they were able to see. So that was a pretty good capability. The next step for us on the PBAS is really to enable it with AI. That way, if you can imagine it, you've got something flying in the air. It has, a repository of enemy threats and targets. It sees it on the battlefield. It identifies it, pushes it back to a decision maker. Decision maker says, okay, yeah, that's absolutely a T-92. We're going to destroy that. Press button. And then some type of firing solution destroys it. That's the next evolution of where we're going. So the speed is a little bit faster than what we were able to do in our rotation. And then the last thing I'll talk through is our EW capability. Another thing that we learned from our observations in Ukraine is unless you're able to protect yourself or see where there's opportunities to engage the enemy through their electromagnetic signature, you're really not going to be relevant on the modern battlefield. So what we did was we created these organizations that General Costanza talked about, and we enabled them with EW, particularly with my most forward element that was a recon element that had multiple capabilities. We enabled them with EW. What it really did for us is it gave us an opportunity to see when our opposing force was using systems, and it allowed us to basically cross-cue another capability in a general area, find a location where the enemy was, pinpoint it, and then destroy it in some kind of means. So it was pretty effective. So that talks through EW, counter UAS, and UAS. And I think the last point that I'd make is, and it really ties it back to the EFDL, all of these things require a network that can handle it and allows you to make decisions quickly. And that's really the tie from the tactical level into EFDL. The capabilities that will come online or coming online enable us to do those at the tactical level. So I'll pause there. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer them as well. But that's all.
Yeah, we'll get right to you in just a second. Just one thing I wanted to say about what Don just talked about is most of those efforts, nobody told Don Neal and 2nd Cavalry Regiment, here's what you need to do. They watch the fight in Ukraine, they watch what's going on, and internally to the brigade, from the platoon level to the squad level and up, these soldiers are innovating and figuring out how to solve these problems. So yes, sir, you had a question.
Thanks, Howard. All fours, I've got a few. So is the Army prepared to compete at scale on drone warfare? Russians are building using tens of thousands of FPV drones a month. They're using, the shot heads, which are long-range strike weapons with the heavy warhead. They're starting to turn those shot heads into FPV drones with, maneuverable capabilities. Is the Army prepared to defend and attack at scale? And how are you going to do that?
Well, I think Flytrap is the start point to that, right? So I think Flytrap is taking the capabilities we have right now, identifying how we layer those capabilities, and then taking that, giving it back to the Army and saying, here's how you do it, now go make the acquisition purchase, right? So I think that's where we're at. Flytrap is just really trying to figure out what the systems are that we need. The scope and scale piece goes back to the Army, and as you know, we just stood up at Joint Interagency Task Force at the Department of War level to actually try to get after some of this as well.
But how long is it going to take to get it to where the Russians already have?
No, I know, exactly right. We're behind. I'll just be candid. I think we know we're behind. We've been talking about counter UAS and UAS capability for a better part of a decade since really we watched the war in Armenia and Azerbaijan go on and saw very much the beginning of the drone those UAS capabilities, and we aren't moving fast enough. And it really took Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the way they're innovating and Ukrainians are intervening to realize, hey, we need to move fast.
Last week, does the U.S. need a long-range strike drone type weapon like the Shahed, which, you know, the Russians are building 5,000 a month and provide a great capability?
Yeah, no, I think we do. So back to the discussion I had, it's not just Shahed, that's just a capability, but air and ground launched effects at scope and scale, that's part of where we want to get with the European defense line, Eastern Flank defense line. So thanks. No, we're behind. That's a great question.
Ilya Ponomarev, U-22 of Ukraine. I actually have two questions for you. First of all, you were referring many times to the experience of Ukraine. Did you actually try to use Ukrainian technologies back in your regiment? Because at your level, you can actually initiate the procurement of some of the Ukrainian-made toys and try to use them firsthand.
Well, let me answer this so he doesn't jump on it. Ukraine right now is helping our NATO allies with training on counter UAS, and I think you probably know this. So Romania, Poland, Denmark is the most recent. So we are finally starting to pull that experience into NATO to help us get better based on the experience you all have. So.
That was actually my second question. Is yeah, there is a training process, and especially with Poles, and at the beginning it happened with Denmark and with Romania. But still, we see a lot of bureaucracy in front of us, and with the current procedures that were set up by European Commissioner on Defense, we're thinking like it will take at least a year, maybe 2 years before we actually start to deliver something, you know, in iron, you know, not just in training. So with the procedures that the U.S. Army has, you could actually speed up the process and help to coordinate the NATO alliance.
And General Donahue is doing that with USARF, right? So there's 5 counter UAS systems that we just procured that are proven in Ukraine that we're trying to field to Poland, Lithuania, and Denmark right now. And you all are part of that process as far as training on the systems. But the system procurement has been done through USARF.
Michael Gordon, Wall Street Journal. You've described a concept that's partly in response to what the Russians are doing into Ukraine and to the longer-term Russian threat. But the Russians are watching what you're doing. You've spoken openly about it for some months, really. So what are the Russians doing right now to try to counter this defensive concept? What do you think they're doing? How are they preparing for it? And how are you going to counter what they're doing to counter you?
They're doing the same things that we're trying to do. So they're integrating, when you look at the Russian strike complex, how they're integrating the long-range sensor capability with the long-range fire capability into one organization, and they've improved that over the last 3 years of fighting. I mean, I got to be careful how I say this. I mean, they know they're fighting a Western-trained, Western-equipped force, and they're learning from that. And they are just as innovative as our Ukrainian partners are, and war does that. It forces you to be innovative and move quick. We are picking up on that, but we're not moving quite as fast as I think we need to. Yes, ma'am. You got a mic?
Yes, I've got a quick question.
Oh, sorry, her hand was up faster than yours.
With Military Times, thank you so much. The purpose-built attritable systems, you talked about making 200 of them between January and May. Is this a capability that makes sense to put in the hands of every unit in the region? Is this something that it's demonstrated as a proof of concept, and that's the whole point? Or, where is this most operationally useful?
Well, I think it's not just Europe. I think they're doing the same thing in Indo-PACOM. So at the brigade level, being able to 3D print PMAS capability, brigades are doing that right now on their own. So the capability already exists. And it's just getting it at scope and scale across all brigades. Yes, I think it is a capability that we want to pursue and try to get to. So I don't know if you're going to agree with that.
Sir, I'll just add, throughout my time, I've been doing this for about 23 years, we've had small UAS in our formations. The Raven was a capability that I had even as a company and troop commander. This is not anything that's new. Building them and the in-house build and train model is what's new. But we validated the requirement for it years ago. That would be the point that I'd make.
He's not the only brigade doing it. So if you look across the Army, almost all the brigades have the capability. The rotational brigades that we just had come through, so 1st Brigade, 3rd Infantry Division, for example, they have the capability. They used it when they went through their combined resolve rotation. So it's not something unique to just 2nd Cavalry Regiment. Yes, sir.
Question. Back here, sir. Yeah. Sir, question.
He's been trying. Okay, go ahead.
Quick question. Sir, thank you for being here in this conversation. My name is Will Priester. I'm with Georgetown University. And I was just asking, you mentioned that you've been learning from Ukraine. You've been watching what's going on in Ukraine. Have you been watching in person? Have you guys had troops go into Ukraine and see some of the effort ongoing there? You have some videos of it. You mentioned videos, sir. Some of your soldiers were watching videos and learning from that. But to what extent are you actually going and seeing the fight and actually seeing where they're manufacturing these underground facilities in Ukraine?
You're asking a question I really can't answer.
Yeah, Tim Martin with Break and Defense. For Project Flytrap, have you trialed low-cost interceptors, high-energy lasers, and some of the things that Ukraine want to get after?
On the low-cost interceptors, yes. Not on the lasers. We have not integrated lasers into that project yet.
Is it something you might have a roadmap for, or?
If they're available and we can get them, of course. So we're not limited to just certain systems. It's really whatever industry wants to come and provide and try to integrate into what we're doing. And again, 4.5 is the next iteration. 5.0 will be in April, and that's where we'll try to pull it all together again. So yeah, if there's any industry partners that are interested, we'd be glad to pull their capabilities into what we're doing with Flytrap.
Okay, and just finally then, on the interceptors, I mean, Russia are using jet-powered engines, so in some senses, interceptors may be completely redundant. If interceptors going at 400 kilometers per hour, Russian jet is always going to make sure that it's never able to attack it. So, is that the type of tactics and changes that you have to kind of just be aware of?
And I think we got to move fast on this, right? So we're doing these different iterations of Flytrap, and it's over a 6-month period. But just within that 6 months, technology's changed so rapidly that there's new capabilities. And so that's why we continue to innovate over the 6-month period and bring new capabilities on board. So thanks.
Hello, gentlemen. Thank you for the work you do. Thank you for keeping us safe. My name is Kevin McKelvey. I'm at George Mason University, College of Engineering and Computing. I am aware of the Finnish-Europe borderlands effort to have establish an open air, open systems test region, and I think it's NATO driven. I was wondering if you're aware of it, and what the similarities between that and the Eastern Front.
And they're not the only ones doing that. Latvia is trying similar so that we can train with these different capabilities without having problems, specifically with spectrum, right? And being able to to have kind of unlimited use of spectrum. And so Latvia is trying to do the same thing. So we realize we got to have the ability to do that.
Roger that. We're involved in some of that work, and was wondering if that was something that UCRAF is endorsed or plans to.
Very much so. Yeah, very much so. And as a matter of fact, a lot of interest in what Latvia is doing. Just because it's tough in Europe, it's pretty congested from a population standpoint. And so being able to have unlimited use of spectrum, or at least better use of spectrum, so we can test these capabilities is always a challenge. So having an open air place like Latvia or what Finland's trying to do is great. So thanks for bringing that up. Yes, sir. These microphones are really tough, I
It's
know.
the off on button. Hey, Robert Dalvett, longtime listener, first time caller. Love what you're doing with the show. When you look at, you talk about the 3D printing capability on just parts as well as the drones themselves, where do you think the tipping point is that you're doing it down at the core and even the regimental level and obviously the different systems that you would field it at scale? At what point do you think you said, we're good enough, we're ready enough, it's easy enough to do that? Thank you.
I'll let Don talk this too. I think it's easy enough right now. It really comes down to a risk discussion when you're talking about parts, right? And I just don't think we're there yet on certain parts that we're willing to accept 3D printing capability just because of the risk associated with it. So aviation parts would be an example of that, right? John, anything else on that?
I think when it comes down to it, if I've got teams, squads, and platoons that are going out and they're doing their normal battle drills, and each time they go out, they're integrating what they're building, they're breaking it, they're fixing it, they're getting back out and training with it. That's the goal. That's where we want to be, and they're not concerned about the loss of the equipment. They're not concerned if they break it. They know that they can get parts through the system, fix it, and get it back up in the air. That's what we're trying to achieve.
And back to ease, I mean, your soldiers in the U.S. Army, it's intuitive for them to do this. Go 3D print parts is not a hard task. Okay, other questions? Yes, sir, of course.
One of the problems when they store their drones is that they can't keep up with the evolving changes in EW. I'm just wondering, how are you facing that challenge? Is it just changes around?
I mean, the gentleman over here can probably describe it better, but talking to the Ukrainians, the analogy is we call it the cookie test, right? And it's, you have some of these factories where they put a cookie in the drone, and when the cookie goes bad a week later, the drone isn't capable anymore because technology's changed so quickly. And I think everybody's heard that analogy. I don't know if there's any truth to that or not, but it moves really, really fast. Again, back to EW, I think we're very much at the beginning of where we need to be to EW capability. I think you know this, Ukrainians dedicate part of basic training to EW. It's an important skill that every soldier needs to have. We aren't there yet, and we know we need to get there. I don't know if I satisfactorily answered your question. I can tell I didn't. Okay, are you trying to give us a hook? Okay, John and I will stay up here, so if you want to come up and ask us questions that maybe you didn't get an opportunity to ask, not going anywhere. The beer will wait for me until I'm done answering y'all's questions. For our partners and allies here out in the group, I just want to tell y'all thanks for what you all do. I live in Poznan, Poland. I travel most of my time from Finland, Sweden, all the way down to Bulgaria. I know the threat is real. I know it's everybody senses it. We all are very much paying attention to Ukraine and what's happening there. But again, thank you all for being here late in the afternoon, and I'll be here as long as you all have questions for me. Thanks very much.